The prairie dusk wore a copper crown, its fading light spilling across the horizon like an old hymn. Dust swirled with the weary wind, carrying the scent of sagebrush and brittle earth, and in that waning glow a lone figure staggered forward, her shadow trembling against the dying day. Halona's breath came ragged, her moccasins torn, her dark hair tangled by the wind. Each step looked borrowed, as if strength itself had abandoned her, until at last she reached a small cabin tucked against the slope of a hill, its lantern burning faintly through the wood-slatted window. She leaned against the door, voice breaking the silence. "Please, don't leave me, I am already broken." Then she collapsed, the weight of her body crumpling against the threshold, as though the earth itself had claimed her. The door groaned open, and Jesse filled its frame, his broad shoulders silhouetted by the last streaks of sunlight. A man carved by years of cattle drives and hard winters, he stood nearly giant in size, though his eyes carried the heaviness of a soul accustomed to solitude. For a moment he did not move, as though some ghost had wandered to his doorstep, and perhaps in his heart he feared that was true. Yet when her body slumped forward, he bent swiftly, catching her before she touched the ground, the warmth of her skin startling against his calloused hands. He lifted her with a gentleness foreign to his frame, carrying her across the creaking floorboards, the silence between them charged with questions he did not yet dare to ask. By the fire he laid her down, her breathing shallow, her wrists bruised with marks that spoke more of men than of accident. He brought water to her lips, hands rough but careful, watching as life slowly returned to her eyes. For long minutes neither spoke. The fire crackled, the coyotes howled in the distance, and Jesse could not shake the image of her stumbling through the dust like a spirit torn from its roots. At last, her eyes met his, dark as obsidian, and though words hovered there, they remained unspoken. He wondered if she had run from someone, or from something within herself. He wondered if he should ask, but some instinct told him silence was the safer road. Still, the question pressed at his ribs. What storm had carried her to his door? Morning revealed her fragile stillness, and Jesse found himself pacing the cabin, unsure if she would remain when strength returned. He was a man accustomed to the company of horses, not women, and certainly not women who arrived on the edge of collapse. Yet when he returned from the well, he found her awake, sitting upright by the fire with her gaze fixed on the embers. Her expression carried shame, as if his kindness was undeserved, and when he offered her bread she accepted it with trembling hands. He watched her closely, saw the way she flinched at the faint thunder of hoofbeats from beyond the ridge, saw how her shoulders stiffened as if expecting someone to burst through the door. She never spoke of it, but the air between them carried the weight of secrets. And still he wondered, what danger walked behind her shadow? Days stretched thin, stitched together by silence. She remained in his cabin, her presence both fragile and undeniable, and Jesse found himself adjusting to her nearness as if it were a test of patience he had never been taught. They spoke little, yet he noticed things, the way she hummed softly to the flames at night, the lull of a song too old to be forgotten, the way her hands, though scarred, moved with grace when she mended a torn sleeve or brushed dust from the table. He also noticed the gossip that drifted on the wind, carried from town to his ears. What business did Jesse McGraw, the loner cowboy, have sheltering a native woman in his cabin? The words carried judgment sharp enough to cut, but Jesse kept his silence. He knew better than to feed the fire of other men's tongues. Yet beneath that silence, he felt the pressure mounting, and he wondered how long the world beyond his cabin walls would allow this fragile peace to last. When he offered her space in his daily chores, Halona accepted, her steps cautious yet steady. Together they tended horses, the animals' snorts filling the dry air, and though their words were scarce, there was a rhythm forming between them. One evening she sang a lullaby her mother once gave her, her voice soft as dusk itself, and Jesse, who had known only the howls of wind and the shuffle of cattle, sat listening as though the world had stilled just to hold the sound. Later, when bread was broken between them at the rough-hewn table, their hands brushed. A fleeting moment, nothing declared, but in that simple contact something cracked open inside him, and he saw it mirrored in her eyes. And he asked himself quietly, could tenderness ever take root in a soil so hardened by sorrow? But the past is a hunter that rarely loses its prey. Word came one night, carried by men who rode into town with stories sharp as knives. Helona had fled from an arrangement, from a fate pressed upon her without her choosing. Jesse overheard their voices at the saloon, their tone one of possession rather than concern, and a cold weight settled in his chest. Back at the cabin, Helona finally confessed in halting words that she had been promised, bartered as if her spirit carried no worth of its own. She had run not for adventure but for survival, fleeing a cage that had no lock, only expectation. Her eyes brimmed with shame, but Jesse saw only courage, the raw will of someone who refused to let her life be written by others. Still, doubt clung to him. If he stood by her, he would stand against the judgment of the town, perhaps against men with guns. Could he bear that weight? The memory of his own past rose like a bitter tide. He remembered his mother, left alone when his father's drunken cruelty drove her to despair, and the shame of a boy growing up under the whispers of neighbors who said the McGraw name was cursed. He recognized that same hollow ache in Helona's eyes, the same battle between pride and helplessness. And in that mirror of pain, Jesse felt something shift, a reckoning of what it might mean to shoulder another's sorrow. For the first time in years, he did not turn away from the ache. He stepped closer to it, as if drawn to a truth larger than his own scars. Still, he asked himself, what would it cost him to stand against the tide of his neighbors, against the harshness of a world that spared little for tenderness? The answer came in small acts of grace. One morning, Jesse walked beside Helona into town, his shoulders squared against the stairs and whispers. She trembled, though she did not bow her head, and in that shared defiance they found a strange kind of strength. People muttered, eyes narrowed, but neither faltered. And when Jesse bought supplies with her standing at his side, the air thick with judgment, he felt something inside him settle. Their bond was no longer a secret wrapped in silence. It had become a shield, fragile yet powerful, forged by the quiet dignity of being seen together. Still, he knew, fragile shields can shatter beneath a storm. How long could they hold against the gathering dark? The storm broke on a night of fire. The same men who had spoken of her return came riding, torches in hand, their voices laced with anger, their eyes hungry for control. They called Jesse a fool, a traitor to his own kind, and demanded he release her to them. The air thickened with the threat of violence, every torch a trembling sun in the dark. Jesse's fists clenched, his body ready, but he refused to meet fire with fire. Instead, he spoke with a steady voice, words carved from a deeper well of strength. He told them she was no burden, no trespasser, she was his choice, his future, the life he would stand for. The men jeered, yet something in his unshaken stance unsettled them, and the crowd of neighbors who had once whispered fell silent, watching. And in that silence, Helona took his hand, her tears glimmering in the firelight, no longer broken but reborn in the courage of being claimed not as property but as equal. Yet still the question lingered. In the ashes of judgment, what new life could grow? Time passed as gently as spring rains after drought. Under the wide prairie sky, Jesse and Helona were wed, not in grandeur but in quiet certainty, their vows carried on the same wind that once bore her plea to his door. Seasons turned, and a child was born to them, a daughter named Ahiv, meaning strength, her cry fierce against the stillness of dawn. Their family became a small defiance to the wounds of division, a living testament to resilience stitched from sorrow. The town, once sharp with judgment, learned to soften, not through sermons but through the simple constancy of their lives. And when Jesse watched Helona cradle their child by the fire, her face illuminated with peace, he knew that brokenness had never been her final truth. It had only been the soil from which strength took root. And so, my friend, remember this: love does not always arrive with thunder, nor with words carved into stone. It comes in gestures, the lifting of a fallen body, the offering of bread, the courage to walk beside another in the face of whispers. Healing is no swift miracle but a slow fire, burning away shame and kindling light. And perhaps if you find yourself broken, you are not lost. You are only waiting for someone to see you whole.